Munagala, Venkataramiah. In September 1896, a young schoolboy who was studying in Madurai went home to his mother and reported, "Mother, a Brahmin boy from a neighboring school has run away from home." Little did he know that destiny would bind him to that same runaway boy, his namesake, that he would meet this boy, now an acknowledged sage at Skanda Ashram in 1918, and that from 1930 onwards he would remain his constant companion till the end. This young schoolboy was S. Venkataraman, later known as Munagala S. Venkataramiah, the compiler of talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, a book that is almost a Bible for all sincere devotees of Bhagavan. Munagala Venkataramiah came from a village called Sholavandan. His ancestors and his own brothers studied the Vedas in the Veda Patashala there. He knew Sanskrit well, but chose to go to an English school in the next town. Subsequently, he went on to study in college. He got married even as he was studying. Since he was research-oriented, he found himself a job in a laboratory in Mumbai. A daughter was born, and though he was very fond of her, he focused all his attention on his research work. After doing extensive research for most of a decade, he went back to college. He graduated from Presidency College with a gold medal, and then taught in one of the prestigious colleges in Chennai from 1912 to 1918. Even during this period, he led the life of an ascetic. Professors were given huge houses to stay in on the campus. He requested his wife and daughter to stay in the huge house, while he himself lived in the small house meant for the watchman. Much was his simplicity. Even in those days, Munagala Venkataramiah was eager to pursue the spiritual life. He had met a Mahatma who taught him the 10 Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras. The Mahatma had even told him to read the Upanishads every day, and this is exactly what he did till the end of his life. In fact, he had all the Upanishads on his table all the time, and would, whenever he felt inclined, read from them. Sometime later, his daughter, whom he loved very dearly, passed away. He was plunged in grief and inconsolable. Restlessly, he started wandering, seeking peace, and finally reached Arunachala in the latter part of 1918. He was told of a sage who lived in Skanda Ashram. When he went there, he came to know that the sage was the very same runaway boy of his childhood, now known as Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. However, he had to leave as his service to the Mahatma near Chennai had to be continued for some time. In 1922, the Mahatma passed away, and this plunged Venkataramiah into even greater sorrow. The Mahatma's last words to him were, "Read the Upanishads." Munagala Venkataramiah continued studying these texts extensively for the next 5 years. He visited Bhagavan once in 1927 at Ramana Ashramam. During this visit, he recognized fully that Sri Ramana was his Satguru, and from then on stayed at the ashram. These are Munagala's own words. In a very critical and distressing period of his life, a humble devotee, referring to himself, sought the presence of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi for his own peace of mind, and lived in the ashram with the kind permission of Sri Nirajananda Swami. One day he got a letter from the government of India extending a job offer as head of the research department in Delhi. The job was a very lucrative one and would have given Munagala both name and fame. The offer was in recognition of his discovery of a chemical that helped ink from solidifying. Prior to this discovery, people found it extremely difficult to write with a pen because the ink would constantly dry up. Munagala showed Bhagavan the job offer, and since Bhagavan's reaction did not seem encouraging, he turned it down. In the presence of and under the guidance of Bhagavan, Munagala plunged into sadhana. He started living at Palakotu, the emerging sadhu community. Telugu was the mother tongue of Venkataramiah. He spoke English and Tamil fluently and was well versed in Sanskrit. However, he felt it necessary to be acquainted with the literary Tamil. Bhagavan then introduced him to Tamil works, especially the Shiva Siddhanta treatises written by the saints. Bhagavan himself taught them to him. These were essential for one who was later to become the compiler of talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. To quote Munagala again, as he puts himself in the third person, the seeker took it upon himself to note down, as occasions arose, the sweet, refreshing, and enlightening words of the Master. This self-imposed task was undertaken for the purification of his own mind and better understanding of the subtle and profound words of Sri Bhagavan. When Bhagavan answered the question of a seeker, it was not the number of words that made the answer so intense, but the fact that the words were charged with a deeper meaning. Hence, translation took time. Sometimes seekers asked questions in English or other languages, and this had to be translated into Tamil for Bhagavan. Bhagavan would then give the answer in Tamil, and Munagala would translate the answer into the language concerned. He had to be totally faithful to the translation. Dr. T.M.P. Mahadevan writes in his foreword to Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, "We cannot but be grateful to Munagala S. Venkataramiah for the record that he kept of the talks covering a period of 4 years, from 1935 to 1939. Those devotees who had the good fortune of seeing Bhagavan reminisce and recall with delight their own mental record of the words of the Master. Despite the fact that the great sage of Arunachala taught for the most part through silence, he did instruct through speech also, and that too lucidly, without baffling and beclouding the minds of his listeners. One would wish that every word that he uttered had been preserved for posterity." Ardent Western devotee and the first one to reside permanently at the ashram, Major Chadwick, in his introduction to the talks, writes, "The 4 years that are covered in talks were the days when the ashram reached the summit of its glory. Maharshi's health was on the whole good, and the hall where he sat was open day and night to welcome one and all. Visitors flocked there from every corner of the world. There was hardly a country that was not represented at one time or another. Sri Bhagavan glowed like the sun, and even those who did not understand him or agree with his words were fascinated and could not help but be elevated by his presence.